Internet. Crocodile, Gara, Iggy. What do all these characters have in common? That's right, they get biddies. Oh, and sand powers. Iggy Sand the Fool is literally made out of sand. There isn't much that Gara Sand can't do, especially when he's juiced up by 1/10 of a mythical beast. And with the power of the Suno no Mi, Crocodile is near unstoppable, being able to turn into sand, control sand, and also turn you into a dried out husk like a sponge under a heat lamp. All badasses in their own right, but the ability to manipulate sand and bend it to your will always be one of the more visually overwhelming and low-key horrifying abilities ever created. Now, we can understand that the one downside to this ability is the fact that you do need sand in order for it to work. Less so for the sand users that can turn into sand, more so for those that can just control it. So a sand controller locked in a metal box isn't going to be doing much. But if you flip that and put the sand controller on, I don't know, Dune, well then they should be one of the strongest individuals in your area. Which leads me to the manhwa that we're going to be talking about today, Sandmancer of the Scorched Desert. Let me introduce you to a series in which the MC, who is tired of getting absolutely shafted, gains an ability that turns the entire planet into his sandbox. No more stalling. This is your kind of content. I'd appreciate a like and a sub. Let's get it. Welcome to Earth, 100 years after a beam of light struck it and terraformed it into one planet-sized desert. And if you thought this would be enough to shake the social structure between the haves and the have-nots,
You serious?
money and political influence aren't the only driving forces anymore. Because the special beam cannon also brought along superpowers that get you a seat at the big kids table. Those that manifested superpowers are called Awakeners. And they also get a sweet tattoo as proof of their new abilities, color-coded and everything. Those with S-tier powers are going to take their place at the top of the food chain, while all those that did not will just have to accept that their situation went from bad to so much worse. Well, all but one, our MC, Zeon. You see, the homie has been living in a nightmare for as long as he can remember, and now he's on his way to work the magic diamond mines. All because he decided to take his frustrations out on someone with a superpowered older sibling. However, on said journey to the mines, and when he was in the middle of making some new friends, his caravan gets attacked by Shai Hulud. Praise be. Panic ensues, and as Zeon is looking back on the shit show he called a life, as he's standing at death's door, his luck takes a 180 and he manages to manifest a superpower of his own. And what OP ability would be a perfect fit on a desert planet? Sand bending. Homie gets a nervous system shock when he connects to the entire world and then proceeds to fire off a sand spirit gun. And his luck doesn't run out there, because as soon as he escapes the sandworm's large intestine, he's met by another group of friendly awakeners. I think the captain of the newly arrived A-team might have sensed that Zeon awakened while they were also on their way to the mines. They're here because plot, and we're moving on. El Capitan double taps the sandworm and chooses to take Zeon to the mines with the rest of the squall. The driver's popping off in the front while Zeon is tied up in the trunk, realizing that with his new abilities, oh, I can become a problem. They make it to the Monostone mine and our boy gets passed off like a hot potato. I'm sure we'll see the A-team again. Maybe. Now, this is where we begin to learn that the mines, and we could also assume the majority of the sand planet, are run on a pseudo-anarchy framework. Yeah, we got the corpos and hotshots funding the place, but people go missing all the time, and for some reason, HR just doesn't seem to report it. Fuck a safety measure, and we're gonna let scams run rampant. Zeon makes more new friends, and just as he's getting accustomed to his new work environment, he falls through a portal. Welcome to a dungeon. First, Zeon had to avoid being eaten, now he has to avoid being melted. And eaten. As our homie is making his way to the top of the volcano to escape this dungeon, he catches the eye of another dungeon crawler and the dude who is going to be our old man mentor, Deoden, with his trusty sentient sword companion, Crayon. We get to witness the sheer badassery of Deoden, Zeon doing his best to not die during all of this, and as they kill the boss and leave the dungeon, Deoden offers Zeon a choice. Either go back to the mines and forget they ever met, or join the OP senior citizen and slowly become a god. I wonder what he picked. My thoughts. We're jumping from one thing to the next in this series. All gas, no breaks. But despite that, I found myself catching up in a day. The setting is probably one of the things I like the most about it. It's got that post-apocalyptic desert Mad Max feel to it, and in my head that immediately opens the door to a world full of scavengers and odd figures roaming around the wasteland. Except now, we get to add superpowers to the mix. The world building is pretty sparse so far. I haven't seen anything that made me go, oh, that's a new take. But I am interested in seeing how this world has shaped the societies living in it. We get a little bit of that with one of the elf villages, where they just basically decided that all they really needed were homes because everything else could just be stolen from the people roaming around the desert. That's the kind of stuff that makes me want to see more. The monsters are fairly generic. We got sandworms on a sand planet, we got a dragon, or Drake, even though I think they're wrong on that one, that lives in a volcano, as well as other oversized animals. We get a glimpse of a beast with stealth abilities, but we basically one-shot it, so we really don't get to learn much about it afterward. But even if we've seen these kinds of monsters before, they're still imposing figures, and watching them get thrown into a fight is still fun. The power system so far is incredibly straightforward. Awakeners are basically broken down into physical, magical, and other. So if character A is a physical awakener, you know what you're getting. We're gonna watch them smack the shit out of something. We haven't really seen any magical awakeners in action yet, but we've gotten a sneak peek at elemental magic. The saving grace for me is the other category, which our MC is a part of. I think it gives the power system enough room so that anything can be a power. And with all that said, I think this works in the series' favor. It gives the artwork room to carry the action instead of having to spend all of its time explaining some overly complicated superpowers. Speaking of action, I can say that the fight scenes and the artwork do a really good job. When we're dealing with abilities that aren't purely physical, like our MC using his sand powers to create shells and spikes, the abilities are visually impressive. And when the abilities are physical, the panels have weight to them. The attacks feel impactful. We get our grand wide shots and the overall action is satisfying to read. I wouldn't recommend this series strictly because of its artwork, but it does a damn good job when it's time to. The characters are another area where I think the series is doing something we've already seen before, but still works well in the story. Our main character has the never give up mentality, which makes him pretty easy to get behind. He comes from the slums, so he's got that everyone gets to hear my unfiltered thoughts kind of personality, which makes the conversations he has a little more interesting. He's put into plenty of life or death situations, and we get to watch him struggle his way through to the finish line. And his goal is also pretty simple: become strong enough so that he doesn't have to take shit from anyone anymore. Then there's Deoden, our mentor figure. Once again, not exactly a new archetype. He's the overpowered old man who acts like he doesn't care, but secretly cares like you're his own child. And even though we've seen characters like this before, he's still entertaining to watch. Truthfully, the mystery surrounding Deoden's sword is more interesting to me than Deoden himself or even the MC so far, but both are still doing a good job at carrying the series. And then we get to my biggest issue so far: the pacing. We're constantly jumping from one conflict to the next. We'll get introduced to a new situation, deal with it or not, and then suddenly we're somewhere completely different dealing with another problem. It's entertaining, but sometimes I'm sitting there thinking, that's it? Okay, fuck it. What's next? I don't necessarily think that this is going to be a problem for the long haul. I have a feeling that eventually we're going to hunker down somewhere and get an actual arc that lasts more than a few chapters. I just think it sucks that we don't get the chance to learn more about these small pockets of the world we're in. We jump from one environment to another at breakneck speed, and I keep finding myself wanting to spend more time in these places and see how the world actually functions on a micro level. And I think that's why I'm ultimately recommending this series. It's conventional, but I think it does a good job at executing on what has already been done. Is the power system simple? Yes, but I still want to see how these powers are utilized in the world. Have we seen these kinds of monsters before? Absolutely. But it's still enjoyable to watch them brawl it out. Do the characters have archetypes that we've been introduced to before? You're goddamn right. But those archetypes are still fun to watch and interact with one another. We may be jumping from one conflict to another, but on the surface, each new area is interesting enough to leave me wanting. We've seen it all before, and yet I still want more. What do you guys think? Gonna join Zayon and Deoden on their journey across the desert? Or are you gonna take the next sandworm to Clarksville? Let me know in the comments. I'll catch you in the next one. Later!